Let's be clear what we're talking about. We're talking about killing a baby that's been born. We're not talking about some euphemism. We're not talking about a clump of cells. We're talking about a little baby girl who's been born and is on a table in a hospital or a medical facility, and then a decision or a debate would be had about whether or not you could kill that little baby. We're talking about the most vulnerable among us, and we have a public official in America out there again and again defending a practice. This is infanticide that we're talking about.
I realize that in this life, there's nuance. There are differing opinions and differing circumstances. Unfortunately, we can debate those. That's the beauty of living in this country. There are, however, some things that defy debate. These are indisputable facts. Lines that just can't be crossed. Now, you can debate the necessity and the legality of abortion all day long. But once a child leaves the womb, regardless of the circumstances, it is an individual being, one that is afforded the same rights and privileges that's afforded any human being, namely, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This is not up for debate, period. So Ben Sasse introduced a bill in the Senate that would actually criminalize the act of murdering newborn babies, or infanticide. Specifically, ones that have survived the abortion process. Keep in mind, these are infants, ones that are no longer in the womb. They are babies who fought and survived attempted extermination. Once again, individuals with all the rights and protections afforded to you. Yet Democrats chose to block this legislation. Now let's take a look at their reasoning and expose their ignorance and hypocrisy. All right, so let's take a look and see what Senator Jeanne Shaheen had to say about the bill. So she says, the bill forced by Senate Republicans today would significantly interfere with the doctor-patient relationship and pose new obstacles to a woman's constitutional right to make her own decisions about her reproductive health.
It's a vote on yet another attack from our Republican colleagues on women's health and their right to access safe, legal abortion.
And yet today, some on the other side of the aisle are trying to use those parents' suffering for political advantage, making worst-case scenarios like these all the more difficult by pushing a bill aimed to criminalize reproductive care no matter the cost.
We're debating today is just the latest salvo in the far right-wing assault on a woman's constitutionally protected.
A word on today's vote on women's reproductive rights.
So Democrats' first line of attack here is that this bill somehow limits a woman's right to an abortion, or in some way limits her medical care. Let's be very clear. There is nothing in this bill that says anything about care to the mother, pre or post birth. Nor does it say anything about care to the child pre-birth. So this has absolutely nothing to do with abortion, period. This has to do with the baby being born and getting the care that it deserves.
If it becomes law, this bill would force doctors to perform ineffective, invasive procedures on fetuses born with fatal abnormalities, even if it's against the best interest of the child.
I'm not sure how staying alive is against the best interest of the child, but hey, continue on, Ms. Duckworth.
If physicians refuse, they'd be punished, sentenced to up to 5 years in prison.
What? A doctor being imprisoned for allowing a patient to die on purpose? The shame of it all.
We know the partisan extremist playbook it comes out of, one based not in fact, but in fiction, steeped in ignorance and misogyny.
Yeah, those dirty men wanting to keep babies alive and stuff. How dare they?
The goal here is obvious: to bully doctors out of giving reproductive care, to scare them out of business, one potential lawsuit or jail sentence at a time, making it even harder for women to get the care they need when they need it most, as the numbers of physicians available shrinks.
Let me remind you once again, there is nothing in this bill, nothing, that mentions anything about a woman's medical care. Zero. Only to the infants.
This is just the latest step in the far right's long march to strip away women's rights, a march whose pace has now quickened under our current president, some politician in Washington, D.C. And when lives are on the line, the folks with MDs are the ones who should be deciding what care is appropriate, not those with partisan agendas.
Where was this kind of talk when Obamacare passed? That affected way more people's access to health care than this bill ever would.
Mothers and doctors know that every pregnancy is different. Both of mine certainly were, and physicians are trained with exactly this in mind. It's offensive and just plain ignorant for my colleagues to claim they know better than a doctor or an expectant mom. It shows an alarming disrespect for a woman's moral compass and her ability to make sound decisions.
So here she actually changes tactic a little bit. Now she's saying that the bill somehow limits a doctor's ability to provide even for the infant. This is not true. There is a provision in the bill that says that the baby must be transported to a hospital if it's in a clinic. Because let's face it, clinics are not designed to support the life of a child. They're there to butcher, period.
Because it would impose requirements on what type of care doctors must provide in certain circumstances.
No, it doesn't. It mandates they must save the child. It does not say how they must save the child.
Let me be very clear. Many of these claims are false. It has always been illegal to harm a newborn infant.
So here Chuck also changes tactics. He's decided to go the route of, it's already illegal, so we don't need to pass this bill. Well, there's two problems with that. Number one is you just passed a bill for anti-lynching. Lynching was already illegal. Not only that, there hasn't been a reported case of lynching in decades. Number two is that even if it is already illegal, the penalties associated with it are so small that it's often ignored. This actually adds teeth to those penalties and keeps the doctors in line with the law.
No sense for Washington politicians who know nothing about these individual circumstances to say they know better than the doctors, the patients, the family.
I'm no cop either, but I do know that if you let somebody who's shot bleed out, well, that's bad too. I don't see the difference.
Contrary to what the proponents of this bill argue, it is and has always been a crime to harm or kill newborn babies. And people guilty of this crime can already be charged and prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Let's be clear. The Senate isn't debating this legislation today because there is an epidemic of infanticide in this country. There is one. There is not one. There isn't one. I can hardly say it because it's really not happening, and so therefore this bill is a solution in search of a problem.
Except, of course, that the CDC would disagree. According to them, between 2003 and 2014, at least 143 babies died after being born alive during botched abortions. And this is probably underestimated significantly. These are only the ones that were caught. Now, in that same period of time, how many people were lynched again? Oh yeah, none.
That the moral judgment of right-wing politicians in Washington, D.C. should supersede a medical professional's judgment and a woman's decision.
Now, by that logic, we wouldn't have any laws. I mean, who are you to pass a law saying that I can't make the decision to kill or rob somebody else? That's asinine.
Conservative politicians should not be telling doctors how they should care for their patients.
Again, they're not telling them how to care for their patients, only that they need to care for their patients, including the baby. So there you have it. The Democrats' excuse for not supporting a bill to save the life of born children basically comes down to lies and hypocrisy.
This should be so far beyond any political consideration. We're talking about a little baby, a baby with dignity, an image bearer. We're talking about a tiny life that has done nothing wrong to warrant being left to die cold and alone on a table.
I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button and consider subscribing. I'll have more content out soon. If you didn't like the video, let me know why. Let's discuss. That's what comments are for. And I'll be seeing you again real soon.